Why are 270,000 teachers leaving the classroom every year? Is there some sort of systemic problem in education? I love my job and I want to stay, but if everybody else is leaving, should I leave too? What are the reasons for staying? Well, those are the things that we want to talk about today, so follow along. Let's see what the answer is. So, my name is John, and this is Teacher Talk, and we're a faith forward space that combines biblical wisdom with research and evidence based practices in order to restore joy to the classroom one teacher at a time, because we don't think that teaching ought to be this difficult. So there are a lot of reasons as to why teachers are leaving the classroom, and we're going to discuss at least three. And these three combine to create a trifecta that not only depersonalizes the teacher, but serves to dehumanize the teacher. The number one thing is student behavior and apathy. And what the research says is that 68% of teachers have been verbally abused by students, and at least 40% report that they have been physically attacked by students. And that issue is no more prevalent than the issue that happened at Matanzas High School in Matanzas, Florida just a few years ago, where a paraprofessional took a Nintendo Switch away from a student who was 6'5", well over 300 pounds. And when she did, he followed her down into the common areas, and there he began to beat her almost to death while her colleagues stood by and watched. So an equally serious problem among students is that of apathy, and it's the fact that students just simply don't care. They're not going to do their work. It doesn't really matter what the efforts of the teacher are. Whenever a student decides that he or she does not want to do the things that are being required of them in class, they are simply not going to do it. So a second issue that's causing teachers to walk out the door is the fact that parents blame the teacher for their students' behavior. The research indicates that at least 80% of parents just simply refuse to hold their students accountable for the behavior in classroom. I can remember a teacher who was disciplining a student for in-class behavior, and that student got up, balled their fist up, and came after the teacher and put the teacher in the corner and threatened the teacher right there on the spot. And when I sat with the teacher and met with the teacher and the parents looked at me and said they wanted to know what my teacher did to cause their kid to get so upset. Well, I can tell you the answer to that. He held that student accountable, but that parent wanted to take up all of our time and just simply turn the issue around on the teacher. A third major issue that teachers are upset about is the lack of administrative support. And again, what the research shows is that 63% of teachers report a lack of administrative support. And this is most notable when teachers need support with a student that's demonstrated poor behavior in the classroom, along with an apathetic attitude towards his or her academics, and the parent wants to blame the teacher. So too often what's happening is administrators want to try to find common ground with the parent, because they don't want parents going to the district and complaining. Because if there's enough people over there griping about whatever is happening in the classroom, all of a sudden these district personnel begin to think, well, it must be true. If all these people are coming over here, then they must be doing something wrong about over there. And so the heat gets on top of the principal. The principal doesn't want that heat. And so what the principal does is try to mitigate with the parent while not supporting the teacher. And I can tell you this, that whenever a teacher makes a decision in the classroom and it comes to the administrator, the only thing the teacher wants to hear is, hey, we got your back. Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it. But instead, what they get is a compromise where the teacher loses every single time. So these three factors, student behavior and apathy, a lack of parental support, and a lack of administrative support, create a trifecta that depersonalizes and dehumanizes the teacher, and it ultimately leads to what we have come to refer as teacher burnout. And that's why 270,000 teachers per year are simply walking out the door. So the question that you might have is, if that's the case and if it's that difficult everywhere, what is it that I can do about it? You to understand your impact. And the impact of a teacher goes far beyond grades. Now, and I'm not saying that grades aren't important, because they are important. And a stable teacher does affect achievement outcomes. Here's what the research says. Teacher stability significantly boosts student achievement, especially for those who need it most. And so at the end of the day, your presence makes a difference. It doesn't just make a difference in their academics, which is important, but that's not necessarily the most important thing. Your presence makes a difference in their future life. So listen to what biblical wisdom has to say. In Proverbs chapter 22 and verse number 6, it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he'll not depart from it." So I want you to just take a moment and notice what exactly the proverb says. So the very first thing that the writer says is to train up. And clearly, whenever you look at that, you can see that this is a systematized process of early instruction and guidance, which is exactly what our students need. And so as important as math is and as important as reading is, and I don't want to take away from any of those things, I want you to know that whenever you're in the classroom, whenever you're coming in contact with students every day, you're doing more than teaching facts. You are giving systematized instruction and guidance for students who are later going to become adults. So the second thing that he says is in the way that they should go. And what is clear is that this is an impartation of wisdom that students don't necessarily have all on their own. They have to learn it from somewhere. Ideally, they would learn it from home, but as we've already discussed, 80% of parents will not hold their students accountable. And so at the end of the day, they're not getting any real wisdom at home. And so the responsibility then lies on the teacher. Listen, here are some certain things that our students need to learn from you and I that will have a great impact on their future. Number one, students have to be taught how to behave. They have to be taught how to be a citizen. They have to be taught how to be kind. And if they're not taught, they will simply choose what feels best to them. Now, again, I know what you're thinking. That's the job of a parent, and of course it is. But the fact of the matter is that parents aren't parenting. The third thing that the writer points out is when they're old, they will not depart from it. And that doesn't mean that they go on to live a perfect life. It just simply means that at the end of the day, the foundation that is built in the formative years by people who care, by meaningful adults in the lives of children, that it has a profound and long-lasting impact. So there again, you can't measure your impact based upon your test scores. You can't measure your impact based upon how many students turned in their assignments. Rather, your impact is measured much later when you run into these students out on the sidewalk or at a public event, and they're there with their family, and all of a sudden they look like a mom, they look like a dad, they're doing well, they're raising their children the right way. That's the true impact that you're having at school. And so you have to change your mindset and see what it is that we're actually doing in public education. So the second reason why I think you need to stay is because of the power of community and the fact that you're not alone. The research indicates that 59% of teachers in America feel burned out. That's over half of America's teachers are going to work and they are emotionally exhausted and completely drained because of a systemically broken system that wears them out. You're not alone. This is not something that is your fault. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you don't do the job right. It's not your fault. It's built into the system at the end of the day. So what the studies reveal is that involvement in a community, even if it's an online community, brings about a sense of belonging and reduced isolation, encouragement and support, learning and growth, amplifying voices in order to drive change, and expanding social networks. And hear the biblical wisdom right here too, because the scripture says is that two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either one of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. And the third reason to stay in public education is because we need to be advocates for change. The number one thing that we can do as it relates to changing how we respond to the culture is by putting in place non-negotiable boundaries that are going to serve as a guide on how we're going to work out our contract for the 2025 and 2026 school year. For instance, some people may put in a boundary and say, I am only going to work the contract hours and I'm not going to go beyond that. Other people might say, well, I'm not going to take emails after work or phone calls after work. Another person might say, I'm not going to get into meetings where parents openly and defiantly disrespect me and say things to me that are inappropriate. I'm going to simply walk out of them. It doesn't matter what the boundary is, but you have to draw boundaries, because if you don't, the people that are in charge will simply just walk over top of you. And you got to be willing to live with the, hey, they're not a team player, or hey, you're making it hard on the rest of us, you're not helping out over here. That's perfectly fine. Let them say those things, because it doesn't really matter, because they can draw boundaries too. All right, draw a boundary and make a positive change. The second way that you can make a positive change in your organization is begin to talk to the leaders about how certain things are done. Maybe it's about how faculty meetings are run, or maybe it's how long faculty meetings are run, or maybe it's the lack of planning time, or how they can reschedule some things in order to keep teachers from having to pull extra duties that they're not paid for. There's all types of ways to do that. And I want to encourage you to be a positive voice for positive change. So if you've made it this far, you've made it further than anybody else, because almost nobody makes it to the end of these videos. But since you're here, go ahead and go to the description box. See how you can connect with us at Teacher Talk. Come join us so that we can encourage you. And if you have been encouraged, go ahead and give us a subscribe, a like, and a share. But most of all, stay strong and keep teaching.